welcome back to Cindy's Library, and today I am going to talk about some ideas for Jane Austen July. Now, our three lovely hosts in their introductory videos for Jane Austen July, they have a ton of wonderful suggestions. And so I suggest you go take a look at them. I will include the links down below. But if you are still not feeling inspired, I have a stack here of some lesser known possibilities. One or two maybe were mentioned, most of which were not. And so let's get to it. Now, contemporary of Jane Austen. Especially when you get into the novels. A lot of those novels are not like what we are used to today, and not even exactly like what Jane Austen was doing, who in her own way, her own style, was quite modern. So, if you're up for a full novel by a contemporary of Jane Austen, I do have some suggestions. Now, everything I'm going to mention, I have actually read. So, I read Rob Roy by Sir Walter Scott earlier this year, or I guess I should say I listened to it, and I loved it. What can I say? It's about a young man, let's see, Frank Osbaldistone. He is from England proper, probably more towards southern England. I think they're within relatively easy driving or carriage distance of London. That's where he grew up. That's where his father went when he left the old family estate. He had no interest in it, etc., and so forth. However, his brother requests some help figuring out some things with the estate. And so since our young hero Frank is in a bit of disgrace with his father, since he wants to do art and literature and not business, he gets sent there to help his uncle and meet his uncle and his cousins. And his uncle's ward, Diana Vernon. His uncle is taking care of Diana for the moment since her father is in hiding. Because yes, it is 1715 in the Jacobite Rising. And, well, let's just say young Frank, he encounters Rob Roy and gets involved in things, whether he likes it or not. So, that would be an excellent choice. One thing I can say about Sir Walter Scott, at least from what I have read so far, is that he seems to be more contemporary like Jane Austen, although in a very different direction than some of the others. Frances Burney's Evalina, this is one of Jane Austen's favorite novels. This is an epistolary novel, which means it is made up of letters. And so we have our heroine, the beautiful Evalina. She's been raised, I think, by an old uncle or maybe a grandfather in the countryside, but she is of age and she's going out into society for her the first time, and this is her trials and travails doing that. And ultimate success, of course. I mean, that's what's expected. But how she gets there, that is the question. This is one of two for Frances Burney's novels that I have read. I enjoyed this one more. Camilla seemed to tread on a lot of the same ground. And I'm not saying that Evalina doesn't, but this is about half the length. So you get all the pleasure without extending it too far, hopefully. At least that's what I found when I read it. And then for Feb Regency, I read The Absentee by Maria Edgeworth and absolutely loved it. This is about Cambry, Lord Cambry. He is Irish. His family has holdings in Ireland, but since he was maybe 6, 7 years old, he spent all his time in England. So he's been very much in English society, something his mother is desperate to join, and it's painful for him to watch her efforts to do so and keep getting rejected. On the other side is his father, full of business worries. Like I said, they haven't been back to Ireland for probably nearly 20 years at this point, and things are not going well on the estate. And of course, there's a bit of love, but a lot of this is our young hero going to Ireland to go to the estate and see how things actually are and put things in order. And I fell in love with it when I read it this Feb Regency. So I can recommend this if you're looking for a novel by a contemporary of Jane Austen. Now, if you are looking for a novel about Jane Austen or a historical novel depicting her characters continuing on or something like that, well, I have a couple here. Rose Servitova, The Longbourn Letters, and this is exactly what it says. These are the letters between Mr. Bennet and Mr. Collins. And yes, they do include the few letters that are actually included in Pride and Prejudice. But there's so much to this, more than that. I mean, we all know how ridiculous Mr. Collins is and how amusing Mr. Bennet finds him. And that is exactly where this starts off. But the more the two gentlemen correspond, the more they start developing an actual relationship and developing some actual affection for each other. I guess I should say this is all by except for the last part, for reasons. I think these are all Mr. Bennet's side of the conversation. But Mr. Bennet, he discovers that Mr. Collins is not just foolish. And he discovers that maybe he needs to be more temperate in finding amusement, shall we say? Anyway, I quite enjoyed this. So, and then What Kitty Did Next by Carrie Kablean. I think I read this for the first Jane Austen July that I participated in, and I quite enjoyed it. This answers the question, well, at the end of Pride and Prejudice, we have Lizzie married off to Mr. Darcy and Jane married off to Mr. Bingley, and we have Lydia married off, for better or for worse, to Mr. Wickham. But what about Kitty? I mean, in Pride and Prejudice, it says she eventually marries a nice minister and settles down with him. But how did that happen? Well, this tells this story, and I'm glad that Kitty finally gets her due, because she's even more overshadowed than Mary. Quite enjoyable. And yes, of course she gets her happily ever after, just like her older sisters have. So that leaves non-fiction to suggest. So there are a few obvious places to start. You want just a straight biography of Jane Austen? Can't get much better than Claire Tomlin's. I think this is the one generally recommended to start with. And I remember quite enjoying this. Certainly a good place to start. Oh, I also read What Matters in Jane Austen by John Mullan. This is more of a literary look at Jane Austen's works, and I quite enjoyed it. It has all sorts of subjects. How do Jane Austen characters look? Do we ever see the lower classes? What games do characters play? How much money is enough? What do characters read? When does Jane Austen speak directly to the reader? This was a great read the year I did this for Jane Austen July, and I definitely recommend it. On a completely different note, this is a memoir. And perhaps technically it doesn't fit, but I really enjoyed it, so I'm including it anyway. And this is Jane Austen Education, How 6 Novels Taught Me About Love, Friendship, and the Things That Really Matter by William Deresiewicz. This is a memoir of a very smart young man. He is a graduate student. He is a bit arrogant, not the nicest human, perhaps. And this is his record of how the 6 novels of Jane Austen taught him to be a decent human being, taught him about love and friendship and what really matters, as it says in the subtitle. And I really enjoyed it. So you might want to consider this one. And if it doesn't fit quite for Jane Austen July, you still might want to put it on your to be read pile. So, the last items are related to the viewing challenges. Specifically, we have The Making of Pride and Prejudice, the BBC version, and of course there are plenty of photos and notes and stories. And then Sense and Sensibility, the 1995 version, the screenplay, and the diaries by Emma Thompson. So If you're looking at watching one or both of these for Jane Austen July, and you want some supplemental material, you could do a lot worse and look at these as well for your nonfiction. So, perhaps that wouldn't quite count as well, since it's not directly about Jane Austen, but you still may want to add it to your list. So, those are some lesser known possibilities for Jane Austen. If you're interested in participating in Jane Austen July, love to hear if you're going to be participating too, and if so, some of your choices are, or if you've read some of these suggestions, I'd love to hear what you thought about them. Thank you so much for stopping by. I truly do appreciate it. So until next time, I hope we all stay safe and healthy, and as always, happy reading.